have this ideal and we're either trying to get to it, we're trying to get rid of it, where we feel a gap between ourselves and that ideal. And a lot of religion takes place in that way. And the religious understanding of conversion is kind of like the wanting to be like God. So within popular religion, the idea of conversion is you enter into a space where you go like, I want to be like God. I want to become like God. I want to kind of inhabit that space, experience, forgiveness of sin and purity and all of those things. So it's kind of like a becoming like God. But within pyrotheology, conversion doesn't happen there. That's not conversion. Conversion happens when you actually do inhabit the space of God and that space begins to crack. So what that means is a lot of people come to pyrotheology by not because, and I've said this before, you might have heard me say this, but I'm going to try and explain why I say it. I'll say that like people come to pyrotheology not because they've that their religious background's too much, it's too difficult, they haven't been able to kind of do everything that it demands, and so they're looking for something less demanding, right? So my conservatism, my evangelicalism was so demanding, I can't do it. I'm going to try and find something where doubt and unknowing can be embraced and I can kind of like let that go. That's generally not the path. The path is actually weirdly people who did do it all, right? They actually, they got to the top of their church. They did everything that was demanded of them. They threw away their record collections. They read the Bible back to front, upside down. They got all the books. They went to all the conferences. They remortgaged their house and gave the money to the church. Like a lot of people is actually they fully went into it. And instead of people who didn't, because if you don't do all of those things, you can continue to fantasize that if you did, everything would be amazing. If only I did everything that like I think I should do, oh, that would be great, but I can't. I haven't. I always fall short. I get bored praying. I get bored fasting. Or hungry fasting. I can't be bothered reading the Bible, right? So then by not doing those things, you retain the fantasy that if you did live into those things, it would be wonderful. But if you do those things, what happens is you then embody the ideal and you discover that the ideal doesn't hold. You discover from the inside that those things don't actually take away all of the anxiety of life and the difficulties of existence. You get to the center and you realize that the center does not hold, right? And then in that very success of getting to the center, there's a failure. You go, oh, I'm inhabiting this ideal and it's not working. Now, at this point, you can do one of two things. Generally, people think of one or two things. And let's imagine this is a choose your own adventure book. I don't know if you still get those, but I remember when I was a kid, it was kind of the only book I ever read were these fantasy books where you would, page 35, it would say, do you want to fight the dragon or do you want to run? And you go, fight the dragon, turn to page 34. And if you want to run, turn to page 65, right? And you'd always keep your finger in the thing in case you do the wrong page, right? Well, imagine Christianity is like a choose your own adventure. And you've got this guy, Finn, and he is in a prayer meeting and he's done everything. He's prayed all the prayers, he's gone to all the conferences, he's beaten drums naked in forests and whatever else he's had to do, right? And he kind of has this realization that this is not working. So he can turn to page 34, which is walk away. Walk away, get rid of it, find something else that works. Or turn to page 65 and repress. Just put all of those doubts and uncertainties down and kind of like just keep on trucking, keep on going, keep on saying the prayers. Maybe it'll work next time. Right? Those are two options that they're the most common options. So one is get rid of it, walk away, and the other is like repress, disavow all of those questions and keep going. But there's a third option, and this is where kind of I think pyrotheology has something to say. And the third option is you inhabit the broken space and you actually see that as a victory. Like that is the insight, that is conversion. Conversion is not where you try to find another ideal to work towards, another system that gives all the answers, another, which is our tendency, nor to repress. But actually, when you inhabit the center and the center doesn't hold, to experience that as a profound freedom from transference, a profound freedom from having to have ideals. This is what grace is. You don't have to be anything. You are accepted. And you accept that you're accepted. This ideal that you're trying to live up to, through inhabiting it, you see that it falls apart. Now, why is that connected to Christianity? Um, well, it's partly because you have the central event in the Gospels, which is a place where Christ, where God experiences a rupture within God, where you, my God, why have you forsaken me? So in all religions, there is a space between you and the ideal God, right? So in all religions, there's a place for that. Either, right, I am separated from God because of my badness, because I'm evil, because I've done things wrong, or because of an inheritance of sin. Or my doubt and my separation from God is a necessary evil. It's just part of being human, part of being finite. One day I will have that oneness, but today I am apart. Or even it's a test. This separation is some sort of divine test, or it's even a good thing. This is part of what it means to be human, and actually being able to live into that space is part of what it means to to be alive, and it's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So those are various ways that religion deals with this feeling that you're separated from the ideal God. To say it's evil, it's just a necessary part of existence. It's a temptation. It's something actually, to celebrate. But in Christianity, there's this idea that God experiences a separation from God. So it's not that we are separated from God, it's also God is separated from God. And the idea of conversion is you replay that positioning in your own life. So you take up your cross. The idea is in conversion, you identify with Christ. In conversion, you identify with Christ on the cross, which means you experience God experiencing a separation from God. So it's not that I'm separated from God, God is separated from God. And you inhabit that space. Then the temple curtain rips, which is the symbol in the Bible, which is the separation between the ideal and who you are. That curtain rips to say there is no separation. And then you enter into what's called the epoch of the Holy Ghost, which is where two or three are gathered together in love. There is the absolute, there is God. Where people look after the neighbor, where people engage in real, political action, etc., there they are living into God. This is what Bonhoeffer called religionless Christianity, which is weirdly, and he said, to live as though God is not given is to live fully before God and with God, which means to lose God as this ideal and give yourself to the world and embrace existence as meaningful, as important. You actually find God in that very act of letting go. So weirdly, within Christendom, within kind of how we understand Christianity today, conversion isn't the point when you want to be like God. It's the point when, in a sense, you identify with God on the cross and realize that God, that space of doing everything right, being in that place, getting that perfection, doing all of that doesn't work. That breaks apart from within, and accepting that, saying yes to that, living into that. And then this is the weird dialectic or the weird paradox, is in the very acceptance of that, you enter into a different type of spirituality, a different type of religious life that actually, Bonhoeffer called religionless Christianity, which is um, the loss of God as an ideal by actually kind of like inhabiting that space, and the experience of God in the midst of brokenness and difficulty and in the midst of life, and giving ourselves to one another. Now, I want to use the office as a way of kind of teasing out what this looks like. And then please, if you've got questions, type them out. Um, and, I'll try to address some of them. Um, so The Office, which is Ricky Gervais's kind of breakout series, and there's an American version. I think it's probably much bigger than the UK version. I've never seen it. I've seen a couple of episodes, but culturally it's not the same. So I've watched the UK. But the UK Office is there's two seasons and then a third season, which is just two episodes. So there's really only 12 episodes, I think, in the first two seasons, six in each, and then two additional ones. And it charts the life of this guy called David Brent. It's a mockumentary, so it's set up like it's a documentary. And he's a guy he's middle aged, he's a bit overweight, he's insecure, he's not happy with his life, but he denies all of this. He tries to pretend that he's a Renaissance man, he's a philosopher, he's clever, all his employees love him. He's always trying to like win their respect, win their admiration. He thinks that he's the funny guy. He's trying to get them to laugh with him. Uh, but the whole series is like every kind of episode is just how embarrassing he is, and it's very subtle. It's a very subtle character because it's not that David Brent is unaware that he's ridiculous. It's not that Brent is unaware that he is kind of like a figure of ridicule. He knows it. You can see it in his symptoms and his twitches and the way that he looks and his little glance that he's actually deeply insecure. But if he fully realized it, it wouldn't be a comedy. If he just realized he was an idiot, then it wouldn't be funny. It would be like you'd relate to him. So he sees it. He knows he's an idiot, but he doesn't admit it. And it comes out in symptoms. At the other level, if he so if he fully admitted he was an idiot, it wouldn't be funny. And if he fully didn't know he was an idiot, it wouldn't be funny. You'd just be waiting for the punchline. The punchline is when he realizes, when he knows, but he doesn't know that he knows. He knows, but he denies the knowledge. He represses it, and that's the funny bit. That's the humor. It's like this guy's such an idiot. He kind of knows he's an idiot, but he refuses to acknowledge it. And so we see the same kind of things repeated in every episode where he does something kind of embarrassing. And in a sense, he's a narcissist. And narcissism has a very bad name. It seems to be the one kind of mental issue that people feel justified in saying bad things about. But for a lot of classical narcissism, it's somebody who deeply hates themselves, somebody who is deeply insecure, doesn't know their place in the world, and so they're narcissistic, acting out. They're kind of thinking that they're brilliant, they're smart, they're amazing. It's just a thin uh, uh, mask beneath which is deep insecurity. And you can see it. And so David Brent has that. He thinks he's amazing, brilliant, fantastic. The world loves him, but like that he doesn't really think that. You can see it in him. Now, the series charts his kind of like coming to realize, coming to know what he knows, coming to actually acknowledge that he's an idiot. It happens beautifully in actually the two episodes for Christmas, the season 3, where he it basically it's after the original Office, and they're charting what he's doing afterwards. He's not working for the company anymore, and he's this Z-list celebrity who goes to these nightclubs, and he just realizes that people are laughing at him, that he's actually a figure of ridicule. And he doesn't have a girlfriend, and he's trying to get a girlfriend to bring her to the office party because he wants to show off that he's got a girlfriend, and very childish kind of stuff. And he joins a dating agency, and the first two girls don't work out at all. And then at the office party, the third date arrives, and she's really cool. And it's very beautiful and very moving because he goes into the party with her, and he's acting like he usually does, like he's trying to be the man, try to make everybody love him. But then he has this honest conversation with his date where he's just like, I'm just not that happy. I haven't done anything with my life, and people are laughing at me, and I'm a figure of ridicule. And he says to her, I go to these nightclubs as a celebrity, but I'm just there for them to laugh at me. And she's like, well, more fool them. She says, you're getting paid to do it. You go in, wave for half an hour, and then take the money and run. So good on you. He's like, oh yeah, no thanks. And she basically creates this space of grace where he's really able to be honest with himself about his weaknesses, his insecurities, and his struggles. And as that happens, he becomes less of a comic figure that we laugh at, like a Laurel and Hardy figure. And he becomes more a figure that we can admire and come to love. And so, the series ends with that. But then a number of years later, they came out with this one-off film called David Brent, Life on the Road. You can get it on Netflix, I think. And this is interesting because the whole thing in the series is he wants to be a rock star. He wants to be touring on the road. He's a middle manager in this company, but he really wants to have adoring fans and play music. So he does that. He sets up a band. He spends the little money he has to get some session musicians in, and they go on a big tour. And again, it's the similar thing. It's like embarrassing. The musicians don't like him. That nobody turns up for the gigs. It's just a car crash, absolute car crash. And he's trying to deny it. He's trying to pretend that everything is great. And again, it's just a veil. You can see through it. You can tell that he's like deeply depressed. Um, but near the end of the film, again, and I think in a stronger way, he begins to realize and be honest about his failure, and that he's not some big rock star, some talented person. He's just this regular guy. And as he begins to open that up, and he's able to do that partly because some of the people around him are again gracious to him, like that woman. Um, he's able to acknowledge his weakness, and he becomes this likable character. And so at the end, even the session musicians go, you know what, good on him. He's a good guy. He tried his best, and he's a bit weird and all of that, but he's a nice person. It's a very moving thing, actually. And then he goes back to this other office he's working in, and he finally sees there's this woman there who has always liked him, and they go off together. Now, what is happening there is, in a sense, I think Life on the Road is a good example that of him inhabiting his ideal of being a rock star and musician, of actually being that, spending all his money, inhabiting that role, giving up everything to do it. And then in inhabiting that role, realizing how difficult it is and how it doesn't, satisfy. Now, of course, you could have had it being a success, um, and you could have still done the same thing, but of course it's a complete failure because that's kind of funnier. But still, he kind of, yeah, he inhabits his ideal. He finally gets there. He realizes that it doesn't hold, and then in that realization, he becomes much more human character, and he's able to go off with this woman, probably start a relationship, and be a lot happier. Right? That's the move from the ideal ego to the ego ideal, to kind of, in a sense, the acceptance of the difficulty of life and embracing your everyday existence. That's the pyrotheological conversion in a nutshell. Now, in the description of this seminar, I also mentioned gargoyles. And actually, it's they're not gargoyles. I think they're called grotesques. I think gargoyles are those creatures that are in fountains that spit water. But grotesques are those figures that are on church buildings, high up. These figures that are like devilish, and they're laughing. So they're looking down at the world. They're looking at all of us, and they're laughing. And in a sense, it's almost like the world is a sitcom. Like, we're all in the office. We're all David Brent, and the gargoyles are laughing at us. They're the audience. They're looking down, laughing at all of us, thinking that we're great, that we have it all together, trying to inhabit these roles. We're the laughing stock of the grotesques. And the only way out of the sitcom of life is by doing what David Brent did, which is in a sense by inhabiting our ideals, realizing that they don't help us escape our unknowing, our anxiety, and the difficulties of life. And in realizing that, not running away from it, not closing our ears to it, not trying to find another ideal to give ourselves to, but in embracing that, we get out of the sitcom, which it was symbolically as you walk through the church doors, in the pyrotheological church doors, are walking into that space of the acceptance of the brokenness of life and the brokenness of our ideals, identifying with the crucified Christ. And weirdly, as we acknowledge the comic nature of our existence, we escape the comic nature of our existence. We become tragic figures, but tragic figures in a very beautiful way. So then, there you go. I started off with defining the superego, the ideal ego, and the ego ideal. This idea that we have ideals, and then eventually we can sometimes live into those ideals, and then when we live into them, they begin to crack apart. And when they begin to crack apart, we can either deny it, which is like just pretend it's not happening, or we can try and find another ideal. But actually, the third move in this choose your own adventure, the third move is to enter into the brokenness of our ideals, to accept that, and find our space within it. And as we find our space within it, that's what identification with Christ means. That's what conversion means. We find a newness of life. We find a way to affirm existence. We find a way to experience joy. Joy, if you go back to some previous seminars, is the definition of enjoying what you don't have, enjoying your own difficulties in the sense of finding meaning in those things. And as we do that, we escape the sitcom of life.